Hey everybody, and welcome to your first step into the world of PHP, a powerful scripting language that's still running the backbone of the web. From powering parts of Facebook to platforms like WordPress and Wikipedia, PHP is everywhere. In this video, we're going to explore what PHP is, how it works with HTML, how to set up your local environment using XAMPP and VS Code, and finally, running our own PHP script. And just so you know, PHP might be old, but it's far from outdated. In fact, it's still used in nearly 80% of the websites today, and it's a great starting point for backend development. So are you ready to make your computer speak PHP? Let's get on with it. First of all, what even is PHP? PHP stands for Hypertext Preprocessor. Yes, the acronym is kind of backwards, but let's not stress over that. PHP is a server-side scripting language, which means that it runs on the server and not on your web browser. The server processes the PHP code and sends the result, like plain HTML, to your browser. Imagine you log into a site and it says, "Hello Alex." That's PHP pulling your name from a database and generating the personalized HTML to show you on your browser. Think of PHP as a chef in the kitchen. Your browser places an order, PHP cooks the data, and your screen shows the finished meal, which is the HTML page. And here's the cool part. PHP can be written entirely inside regular HTML code. And let's look at this very example. Inside this index.php file, we have written our HTML structure and our PHP code as well. The HTML is, well, regular HTML, but the PHP code contains inside these angular brackets and then question mark tags. So this is the official PHP tag. Echo, this is printed using PHP, is PHP code, and everything else is HTML code. When your browser requests this page, the server runs the PHP code and replaces the output with plain text, sending only HTML to your browser. And that's the magic of PHP. The gist is that for this system or for this code to work, the code should be saved inside a PHP file and not a HTML file. And I will show you what I mean using our own coding compiler. So we have coding.php, that is our PHP compiler loaded up in coding. If I run this code, both welcome, that is HTML code, and this is printed using PHP, which is of course PHP code, is loaded onto our output or our web page, for example. But if we write this same code inside an HTML file, we can see that only the HTML bit is printed out. So for this system to work, the code should be saved inside a PHP file. Alright, now that we have some basic knowledge about what PHP is, it's time to set things up. To run PHP code, we need a local server, and the easiest tool for this is something called XAMPP. It includes Apache, which will be our web server, and PHP bundled together. And for downloading XAMPP, we can just type out XAMPP download in our web browser and hit enter. In the first link, there will be a link to which will lead to a download page for XAMPP. And you can download XAMPP according to your operating system. I have Windows, so I will download the latest version, that is 8.2.12 at the time of recording this video. I'll download this, and this should start a download on your browser. Okay, so here is the installer. I'll just click download unverified file, and this will start the download of the file. So as you can see, this is being downloaded, and I'll continue the video after the file is downloaded. Okay, so my file has finished downloading. Now I will execute this executable file. Okay, so it says welcome to XAMPP, and okay, so we'll click on next, and then we need all of these files, not all of these, but I'll just leave it as it is. So next, and this will save in our C drive, and this is the default location, so I'll just click next. I will prefer the English language, so yes, and then next, and it will just start to install. It will install like any other app, and after that we'll open the XAMPP control panel and click on start next to Apache, which will be our web server. So we'll wait for XAMPP to download first. Okay, after your software is done installing, you might come across this window right here, which is Windows Security Alert. You have to click on Allow Access. And after that, you will be prompted with this window. Do you want to start the control panel right now? As we are going to use XAMPP right now, I'll click on this, I'll tick on this, and I'll click on Finish. And the XAMPP control panel should launch. So this is our control panel right here. After opening the control panel, we have to click on Start next to Apache, since this will be our local server. After clicking on Start, your local server is now live and ready to interpret PHP scripts. So Apache is the web server that allows your PHP scripts to run. When you click Start on Apache, you're basically launching your local mini internet. After we are done installing XAMPP on our local device, we can head over to the C drive or main drive of our installation, which we picked. I picked the default, so it is in local disk C in my case. And we can see here that there is a XAMPP folder. And inside this folder, we can see a folder called htdocs. And all of the documents or files that will be kept in folders will be kept in this htdocs folder. So inside this htdocs folder, I will create a new folder, and let's call it php-basics, and hit enter and create this folder. And just a quick tip, we should always use lowercase file or folder names without spaces. We can use hyphens or underscores instead. These help in cross-platform operations and during mentioning or typing out the name of our file or folder in URLs, which I'll be showing you in just a while. So after creating this PHP basics folder, we can open it. We can head over to this bar right here, location, and then we can type out cmd. I hope you guys have VS Code already installed. If you don't have it installed, we have a video on our channel right here, so you can install it using that tutorial. I'm assuming most of you have already installed VS Code, so after opening our command prompt through our newly made folders location, we can just type out code and space dot and hit enter. Now what this will do is it will open VS Code and it will open that folder inside VS Code. So yes, I trust the authors. Now we can create a new file and let's name it index.php. So this will be our PHP file right here. And after doing all of this, it's time to write your very first PHP script. In index.php, we have to type this, an angular bracket, an open, PHP, and our PHP code first. So let's say echo hello world. And after we're done with our code, we can type out question mark and then close the angular bracket. So this tag right here tells the server to start interpreting the PHP code, and this tells it to stop. So echo inside PHP is used to output text onto our web page, and it is interpreted as HTML when it is printed out. So this line simply prints hello world onto your browser. And yes, this is basically the hello world of the backend universe. Now we'll save this file or save this code onto our file, and in order to run this code or to see the changes of this code on our web page, we have to open our web browser, a new page on our web browser, and type in first of all localhost. So localhost slash the name of our folder inside our htdocs, which was php-basics, and then slash the name of your PHP file. So in our case, it's index.php. Now we have to hit enter, and voila, there's hello world onto our web page. Now keep in mind that we have our Apache server running, so that is why this is possible through our local host. We are locally hosting this web page onto our server, into our local server. So in order to open our web page through localhost, we have to have our Apache server running, and this PHP basics folder should be inside our htdocs folder. So you have to type out the correct folder name, which should be inside htdocs, and the correct file name as well. And you have to use localhost, and XAMPP, that is Apache, should be running. So you have to keep all of those things in mind. In order to avoid index not found or 403 error, you should check all of the things that I've mentioned just before. And after all of this, when you open up this link in your web browser, you should see hello world. And if you see that, congratulations, you have just written and run your first PHP script locally. Okay, after this, just like we used echo to print out hello world onto our web page, we can use another method, that is using print. And just a note, I did not use semicolon in this line, but it is very important to use semicolons in PHP to avoid critical errors. So we'll use a semicolon, and then we'll use the print method. So this is basically a language construct of the PHP, which means it is inbuilt into the PHP syntax. So this can also be used in outputting text. So let's say we type out this is printed with print, a semicolon, and then save. Now this does not update automatically after we save, just like live server if you are familiar with HTML and CSS, but we have to click on reload. So as we can see, this is printed with print is also outputted onto our web page. Now this is printed onto the same line as hello world, and in order to make this print out in a new line, we use the br tag, which is an outdated tag of HTML, but we have to use that br tag inside the string itself. So if we use br inside this string after hello world and save it, then reload, we can see that this line is printed on to a new line. So both echo and print are used to display output, but here's the difference. Echo is faster and can output multiple values, whereas print returns a value, a single value. So you can use it in expressions. But in modern PHP, you can just stick with echo since it's simpler and used more often. Now that was it for today, but before we wrap up, here are some beginner mistakes that you'll want to avoid. First of all, like I mentioned previously, that is avoiding the use of semicolons. So if I remove this semicolon and click on save and click on reload, we can see that it hits us with a parse error and syntax error, and it says that it should be having a semicolon expected on line 3. So before line 3. So this is the number one mistake beginners might make. So you have to avoid this. And another mistake that I mentioned previously is saving files without the PHP extension, .php extension. And another mistake is not starting the Apache server before you load up this localhost link or URL onto your web browser. And the next is entering the wrong URL. Again, you have to name your folders on lowercase and separated by hyphens, or else it'll throw errors like this when you try to load the URLs. So I hope you'll keep these common beginner mistakes in mind and be able to debug your code while encountering errors. So nice work! Today you've just installed a PHP server, written your first PHP script, and understood how PHP and HTML work together. In the next video, we'll talk about variables and data types, how PHP stores text, numbers, and logic so you can start building real functionality. If your script worked as intended, let me know in the comments. Or if you encountered any errors, also let me know in the comments so that we'll be able to help you or guide you through your errors. Hit that like button if you learned something today, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Catch you in episode 2, and until then, bye bye. Hey everybody, welcome back to the PHP series. In episode 1, we made your computer speak PHP and wrote your first PHP script. Pretty cool, right? Now in episode 2, we're diving deeper. We'll explore variables, data types, and constants, the real magic behind your code. These are like the containers or labels or fixed values in your code's toolbox. You'll use them all the time. And here's what you will learn today. You will learn how to store and update values, what kinds of data PHP can handle, how to log values in place with constants, and how PHP handles and sometimes guesses data types. So let's jump right into it. First of all, what are variables? Variables are like labeled boxes that you use to store stuff. Names, ages, prices, addresses, you name it. In PHP, every variable starts with a dollar sign, and let's see an example. First of all, I'll open the previous PHP folder that we made inside htdocs, inside the XAMPP folder, that is index.php. This is our code from our previous episode, and now I'll remove this to write some new code. But first of all, before doing that, always remember to run your Apache server through XAMPP. If not doing that, we cannot open our URL which contains our local host. So Apache will start the Apache server, and after it has started, we will write our PHP code. So, like I said before, in PHP, every variable starts with a dollar sign. So first of all, dollar sign, then name equals, let's say, Steve. Our semicolon, you should not forget semicolons, and then let's say age equals 20. So name stores the string Steve, and age stores the number 20. Now you can change what's inside the variable anytime, just like reloading or refilling a box. And some naming tips: variable names can contain letters, numbers, and underscores. They can't start with a number though. No spaces or special characters. And they are case sensitive. That is, $age and then capital AGE are different. So let's say this is 30. Now these are two separate variables since they are case sensitive. Now that we know how to store values, let's talk about what types of values we can store. PHP supports several data types, but here are 4 that you'll use all the time. So let me just remove all of this and list out all the data types. So first is string, which is just a group of letters stored inside double quotes or single quotes. So hello world. This is a string. Another data type is an integer. So integer $year equals 2025. Another is a float. Comments is this. Another is a float, which is just a decimal value or a floating point number. So let's say pi is equal to 3.14. And finally a boolean. So boolean, let's say is logged in equals true. So like I mentioned before, these are the 4 data types that you will be working with the most. Strings are just texts, integers are whole numbers, floats have decimal points, and booleans are either true or false. PHP is loosely typed, which means it figures out the type for you. You don't need to declare it like in some other languages like Java. So there are also other types like nulls, arrays, and objects, and we'll get to those later. So first, let's talk about how to build dynamic text using variables, that is, using the value of variables in our text. Let me remove this and again start with our name variable. So name equals a string, that is Steve. So if you want to use this variable dynamically, we can do that in 2 ways. First is concatenation. That is typing out echo. Remember, this is used to print out things onto our web page. So hello, comma, space, and then in PHP, the concatenation operator is just a dot. So to concatenate our name variable, we'll type out $name, then dot once again, and let's put an exclamation mark. This. And another way is by using interpolation or string interpolation. So we'll type out echo, but inside this we should write double quotes, hello, and directly our name variables. So name. See how this is lit up in blue, meaning that this is the variable value. Now let's save this code and open up our browser and open up our localhost php basics index.php. So we can see that both output to hello Steve. Now just so that they are in a different line, let's add a br tag which we discussed in our previous video. So if we reload, this will be in the other line. So we can see that both concatenation and string interpolation give out the same output. That is, they use the value of the variable dynamically. Concatenation uses the dot operator to join text, whereas interpolation lets you plug variable values directly inside double quoted strings. But here's the gist. Interpolation does not work with single quotes. So let's try this with single quotes. So single quote, and we'll remove this, and then single quote once again. Now already you might have noticed that this $name is not blue, which means that this is not the variable value. Now if we save this code and reload, we'll see that literally $name is printed out onto our web page. So hence we should use double quotes if we want to use the variable value dynamically. So hello Steve. Alright, now what if you want to store a value that should never change, like your app's name or a tax rate? That's where constants come in. And the cleanest way to create one in PHP is by using the const keyword, which is similar to JavaScript. So const, let's say site name equals code planet, let's say. Now if we type out echo site name, let's see what it outputs to. So it outputs to code planet. You don't use $sign when accessing a constant, and if you try to change it later, PHP will throw an error. Okay, now that we know what constants are in PHP and how to define them, here's something that PHP does that's both helpful and sneaky. It tries to guess the type of the variable when performing operations, and this is called type juggling. So first, let's define two variables, one called number, which will actually be a string, 10, and then another variable called result, which will equal to our number variable plus 5. So our number variable is a string, but 5 is an integer. So let's see what echo result will output to. So if we save and go to our web browser and refresh, you can see that it outputs to 15, which means it is treating 10, which is in fact a string, as a number. So even though number variable is a string, PHP sees 10 and treats it like a number when doing math. But we have to be careful since this can backfire. Now if we type out 10 cats inside this, and let's say we add 10 or 120, let's say, okay, save it and then refresh, we can see that it gives a warning that a non-numeric value encountered in line 6, but it still outputs the result to 130, which means that it is still adding the string and number values. So PHP just reads the number at the start and ignores the rest, which might cause bugs in real apps. So you have to avoid that. If you don't want PHP to make guesses, you can cast variables into a specific type yourself. And we can do this like this. So we'll define a new variable called price, and we'll set its value to a string value of 99.99. So in fact, this should be a floating point. But if we type out price equals a bracket, then float and $price, we'll see that this has been converted into a floating point value. And we can confirm this by using something called the get type. So echo get type, and we can check the type of the variable price. So let's add a br tag so that it's cleaner when we observe the results. So br, and then let me close the okay, and then after we have manually typecasted our price variable, let's use that once again. So get type, and then in our bracket or parentheses, it's price. So let's save this and head on to our browser to see. So it's string that is our first data type, that is price, it's string, but it says after we have typecasted to float, it says double. Now something about PHP, float, double and real all mean the same thing, floating point numbers. The get type returns double due to PHP's internal naming, but it's still just a float. So I just wanted to show you guys that we have successfully typecasted the variable and now it is a floating point value. So it is returning double. Now other casts include int for integer and then float. Okay, we have discussed float, so I'll not type out float, so string, and then for boolean values we just type out bool. So these are the typecasting methods. So casting gives you more control and it is very useful when dealing with form inputs or APIs. So let's put it all together in a simple example. No logic or conditionals yet, just variables, constants and strings. So we will create a variable called product name. So product name equals, let's say it's a wireless mouse. So wireless mouse, a semicolon, and then another variable which will note down its price. So let's say it's $14.99.99. And then our currency, let's say it's rupees, semicolon. So we'll create a constant called store name, which will equal to, let's say, Logitech. So Logitech. And now we will cast price from string to a float. So to do that, just like we discussed just before, we'll use float and then price. So after this, we'll just type out echo and we'll print this out onto our web page. Welcome to dot, you know what, instead of the dot operator, I'll just use, no, okay, let's just use dot operator since we don't have a dollar sign for the constant. So store name and then an exclamation mark. Then we'll print out a new line and then we'll print out today's special, and since we're gonna use double quotes, we can just type out product name for $ currency space $ price only. Now let's observe the results. Save and then, so welcome to Logitech. Today's special wireless mouse for rupees 14.99.99 only. So this uses variables with different data types, a constant, typecasting, and concatenation and interpolation. And that was it for today's video. Nice work today. You've learned the building blocks of PHP memory, that is variables and data types. So coming up in episode 3, we'll dive into operators and conditional statements. If you liked the video or found it helpful, please drop a like and subscribe to our channel for more such videos. And until next time, keep coding and keep growing. Bye bye. Hey everyone, welcome back to our PHP journey. Today we are diving into the brain of decision making in PHP. Those are operators and conditional logic. Have you ever wondered how languages or PHP decides if you pass an exam or are eligible to vote or should be shown a warning message? Well, we're about to meet the tools PHP uses to make those choices. So those tools include, first of all, operators, which consist of arithmetic, assignment, comparison, and logical operators, and conditional statements, which mainly consist of the if-else block. So, since things are about to get logically intense, Let's get started right away. First of all, let's kick things off with arithmetic operators and assignment operators. So, arithmetic operators are PHP's built-in toolbox, and these are your classic operators. Now, I'll show you guys in VS Code what I mean by that, but before, let's delete this code from our previous episode, and let's start our Apache server through XAMPP. So, always keep this in mind if you want to check your results through PHP. So we have started our Apache server. Now I will type out first of all arithmetic operators, and then I'll paste this code that I've copied. So these are our arithmetic operators. So this plus sign, minus sign, this asterisk sign, which actually indicates multiplication, is our operator for multiplication. This slash is for division, and this is something called the modulus. Now, I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with all of these signs, but some of you might get stuck on what this means, so I'll explain it to you right away. So first of all, these are our variables, $A and $B. So these have a value of 10 and 3, and I'm pretty sure you can guess what all of these output will be. Now we'll save this code and we'll open up our URL in PHP. So first of all, localhost slash php basics and index.php. So this will only work if you have XAMPP loaded. So we can see that all of our results have been concatenated. So what might be used in order to print this out in different lines? Now I did tell this to you guys in the previous episode, and let's see if you guys remember. So it's the dot operator, and then inside our quotes it's the br tag. So let's see if that worked. So I'll save this and then I'll move on to our localhost. So yeah, that did work. So that is .br. So let me just copy and paste this in each and every line so that you guys can read the results easily. So copy and then paste, and paste once again, paste, and just for good measure paste here as well. So these are our results. So first of all, we'll discuss it one by one. So let me just pull this up and put this here. First of all, we have echo a plus b, which is 13. So this is visible. So 10 minus 3 is 7, and 10 times 3 is 30, and 10 divided by 3 is equal to 3.33333. This is recurring, so this is a floating point value, and I'll explain to you guys about the modulus. So what modulus returns is the remainder after the division. So when we see 3 can multiply up to 3 times up to 9, and after that it's straight up jumps to 12. So in order to divide 10, it should multiply itself by 3 times. So 3 times 3 is 9, and our remainder is 1. So using modulus will give our output a value to 1. So if I typed out here 11, it should give out the result to 2, because 3 times 3 is 9, but 2 are still left. So 9 plus 1 is 10, and plus 1 is 11. So 2 is still the remainder of the division of 11 by 3. So it should give out to 2. So let's refresh. So it's 2. Now, if I type, or if I put the value of a as 12, what do you think will happen? I want you guys to put your guesses or your logical explanations in the comments down below, but it is pretty simple. Like I said, the modulus returns the remainder of the division, so keep that in mind. So that was it for our arithmetic operators, and now we can move on to assignment operators. So assignment operators help you to update the variables, kind of like saving progress in a game. So first of all, let's delete this, and then we'll say a variable called x is equal to 5. Now if I type out echo $x, it will just print out the value of x. But if I use the assignment operator, which is one of the operators plus equals to, so $x plus equals to 3, what this will do is this will add the value of 3 to our variable right here. So it is essentially the same as doing $x equals $x plus 3. So it's like updating the value of the variable. Now you can also, first of all, before I explain the other assignment operators, let's save this and see our changes. So first of all, oh no, let's print out, or let's use echo for our variable once again. So $x. Now save this and we'll reload. Oh, so unexpected token echo. Oh, I forgot to put a semicolon here. I'm really sorry. So save. So always remember to put semicolons. So reload. Now it should print out our values. Now it's just giving 5 8 since it's on the same line. So you guys will have to use br a lot if you want to print stuff on your web page using PHP. So br or br tag. In this, I realized that I should put out echo and then echo the value of the variable once again. So in order to print this out in separate lines, I'll concatenate the echo with br tag so that they print out on separate lines. So control save. Now we can observe the changes. So keep you in mind that we have essentially updated the value of the variable and increased it by 3. So 5 plus 3 should equal to 8. Yep, so first it outputs to 5 since we have put this on the value of the variable. Yeah, so it outputs to 5 and 8 since we have the value of the variable as 5, and then we have written plus equals to, that is adding 3 on to 5, so it outputs to 8. So let me just snap this on to the right side and this onto the left side for easy changes observation. So you can see that this is the assignment operator which updates the value of variables. It's like telling PHP, take this value, do something with it, and keep the new result. So you can also use other arithmetic operators besides the plus sign. So if you type out minus, hit save, and then refresh, it should output to 5 and 2 because 3 has been subtracted from 5. Now if you type out multiplication, it should multiply the value of the variable and store it as well. So it gives out to 15, and this also works with division. So let's say this is 6. I'm sorry, 6. It should output to 2. Yes. So these are the assignment operators, and PHP follows an operator precedence. So remember, some operations are evaluated before others, just like regular math. And one thing that I forgot to mention, besides our plus, minus, divide, and then multiplication operators in our arithmetic operators, there is another operator as well, which is the exponential or power operator. So if I type out echo 2 to the power, that is double asterisk, so this is the power operator, 2 to the power of 3, it should output to 8. So let's save this and execute. So it outputs to 8. It's just concatenated, so let me just I'm sorry, it should be in quotes. So br, save, and then output. So yeah, this is the power operator, and just so you know, this follows right associativity. So if I typed out asterisk 2, you might think that, I don't know what you might think, you might be confused actually. So what actually happens is it first calculates 3 to the power of 2, then 2 to the power of 3 to the power of 2. So 3 to the power of 2 is 9, and it will output to 2 to the power of 9. So it's 512. 2 to the power of 9 is 512. So just so you know, it follows a right associativity. So right calculations are done first. So that was it for assignment operators and arithmetic operators. Now let's move on to comparison and logic. So let's get to comparison operators first. Comparison operators help PHP compare values and make decisions. So to demonstrate that, I'll just erase this and I'll type out two variables. First of all, a, which value will be equal to 5, and then 5, and then our b, which will equal to 10. Now we will use something called the var dump. So var dump, or variable dump, which will put a, and to compare if the values are equal or not, we use the double equals to sign. So remember, equals 2 is used for assigning a value to a variable, but double equals to is used to compare the values of variables. So this will compare and check if a or is equal to b, which will obviously output to false since a's value is 5 and b's value is 10. Now other comparison operators include var dump. Let's say first of all a, and our not equals to sign. Our not sign is symbolized by this exclamation mark, and not equals to a is not equal to b. Now this should output to true since a is not equal to b. I'm sorry, I forgot to use the dollar sign. And yeah, so let me just copy this line once again and change the operator. So there are obviously other operators as well. A is less than, and then there is a is less than or equal to. So I'll just type out a is less than and a is more than to show you guys the difference. Why not less than or equal to as well? So this is more than or equal to, and this is less than or equal to. So save all of this and we'll see what all of these output to. Oh, I'm really sorry, I should have put br tag. So I don't think var dump and br tag make a difference, so I'll just see. Yep. So first boolean value a is equal to b. We have tested if a is equal to b. We have tried to compare if a is equal to b. So this outputs to false since a is not equal to b. And a is not equal to b. Well, it is true that a is not equal to b, so it outputs to true. And a is less than b, which is true, so it outputs to true. A is more than b is false, it outputs to false. A is more than equal to is essentially the same, so these will output to both false and true according to their greater than or less than values. So these are the comparison operators, and we use var dump here because it shows the true or false, that is boolean values, to our output directly. Now let's go deeper than this. In PHP there's something called the strict comparison operator. Sounds scary, right? Well, and it is represented by the triple equals sign. While the double equals sign only checks the value, the triple equals sign also checks the data types. So if you don't know what the data types are in PHP, make sure that you check it out in our previous video, link in the description. So first of all, we'll test the values of a and b once again. So let's say a and b are, first of all, a is this value, but I mean numeric value, and it has the value of 5, and b is a string which still has a value of 5. So let's save this and first check it out if echo $a, no, not echo, sorry, var dump $a is equal to $b. So let's see what this outputs to first. I'll save this. Oh, sorry, equals to, I meant double equals to. So save this, and then so it outputs to true. Now, even though a and b are of different data types, since they have the same value, that is 5, PHP assumes that it is equal if we use the double equals to operator, that is the comparison operator. Now, if we use var, no, I'm lazy, so I'll just copy this line. So var triple equals to a triple equals to b, what this does, it not only checks the value, but it also checks if the data types are equal. So if we refresh this, it will output to false, since a and b do have the same value, but they have different data types. So if we strictly compare the variables a and b, it will output to false. Now of course, if it is the numeric data type and save, both of them should output to true. Since they have the same data types as well, this operator outputs to true. Hey everyone, welcome back to the 4th episode of our PHP series, and this episode is all about understanding PHP loops. By the end of this video, you'll know when and how to use each type of loop in PHP. So without any delay, let's jump right in. You know what loops do, they repeat code. Instead of doing manually a same thing time and again, if you apply loops, it'll do that for you. So first of all, like in any loop video, in PHP 2, we have while loops and for loops. And there are some variations of while loop, like the while loop, normal while loop, and the do while loop, while there are variations of the for loop as well. And the variations of for loop might include for each loop and for loop. So and to exit out of these loops or continue iterations, we have the break and continue. So in this video, we'll just be discussing about all of this: while loops, for loops, and break and continue. So first of all, let's move to while loops. And in order to move to while loops, I'll first of all start the XAMPP, and inside XAMPP my Apache. So the main concept of while loops is to repeat code while a condition is true. And for that, I have opened our htdocs, and inside htdocs, index.php inside VS Code, and I'll be writing a simple while loop for you guys. Now, our while loop will be creating a variable called x. Okay, so x equals 1. So while, first of all, we'll write a while loop. So while our variable x is less than or equal to 5, we will execute a certain code. So while our condition is true, the code inside these curly braces will execute. So let's say while our x variable is less than or equal to 5, we will echo out our variable. So echo x. Okay. Now after this, we have to write an increment condition. So let's say this is an exit condition, since this will eventually make the loop stop. So x plus plus. Now what I did here is I increased the value of x by 1. X plus plus means it will echo out 5. I mean echo out the value of 1, that is x value, and it will increase the value of x by 1. So first it will echo out 1, then it will echo out 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the loop will stop. Why? Because we have put the condition that this loop will only execute while x is less than or equal to 5. So you might have guessed it already, it will print out 1 to 5. So for observing our results, we'll just have to type out localhost php and index.php. See, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if we type out here echo and then our br tag and refresh it, oh, this should be inside quotes, I'm sorry. So, and refresh it, it will print out all of them in a separate line. So this is pretty simple. Now, while our condition is true, our loop will execute. So this is the while loop, and this while loop checks a condition before executing. So let's say if this was supposed to, the value of x was supposed to be 7, this would not execute at all. Since our initial condition is not true, it will not even go inside this loop. It will just skip it. So let's say we echo out, this is after the loop, and then end with a semicolon. I have turned on autosave, so it saves automatically. See, now if we put this to 3, what do you think will happen? Of course, it will output to 3, 4, 5, and then stop. So that's it. So pretty simple. The concept of while loop is pretty simple. Now, if you have to check the condition before running it, no, suppose you want to execute the code first and check a condition. So suppose you want to execute a certain block of code at least once, okay? Despite the condition, you want to execute it once. Well, that's where the do while loop comes in. In do while loop, it first executes a certain block of code, then we define a condition. So it executes, then checks. So for this case, let's define a variable called y, and let's say its value is 10. Okay. Now for our do while loop, our syntax is a bit different. So we'll do first of all our code to execute. So echo and $y. So let's keep a condition after this. First of all, let's keep an exit condition. Like I said previously, this line of code, I'm sorry, this should be $. So this line of code increases the value of y by each time we execute the loop. So after do, we'll keep finally our while condition. So while our value of y is less than or equal to 10. No, let's say less than, okay, let's put this the value of 11. So if we were implementing a while loop, this code will not execute at all. But since we are implementing a do while loop, this do part executes first and then only it checks the condition. So let's refresh. Turns out I forgot a semicolon. So here. Okay, so this is after the loop. So you can see that 11 is echoed out first and then only it checks the condition and stops it. So despite keeping any value, suppose 60, this will execute. Whereas in the same case, if we put the value of 60 in a while loop, this code will not execute at all. And about this increment value, this will increase the value of y as I told you before, but if we put in minus minus, this will decrease the value of y by 1 each time. Scratch that and let's put this a normal while loop. I want to show you guys the exit condition, why the exit condition is so important. Okay, so suppose our initial value is 1, okay, and while our variable, that is y, is less than 10, this will echo out the value of y and then concatenate our br tag. Now let's say we don't implement an exit condition. See, it just goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. So this will keep executing and eventually it might crash your browser, so you have to exit out of this. Okay, so you do have to define an exit condition. Now if I were to implement the same case, but I would increase the value of y by 1 each time, so this will prevent our infinite loop. What was it? It was localhost. Yep. So yeah, it printed out values up to 9. So that is why the exit condition is important. Now I hope you understood while loops and do while loops. Now it's time for a for loop. And the condition or syntax of a for loop is pretty simple. You have to keep in mind that we use while loops when the number of iterations is unknown. Suppose while a condition is true, you have to always execute a certain block of code. That is when we use the while loop. In that case, our number of iterations is unknown. But while using for loops, our number of iterations is known. So the syntax for loop is for. First of all, we initialize the value of the variable. So we don't have to separately declare a variable outside the for loop. We can do it inside the for loop. So for our for loop, we can define a variable called I equals 1, semicolon, and then our condition for looping. So let's say we want to execute this code as long as our value of I is less than or equal to 5. And then finally our increment or decrement value. So this is pretty similar to a while loop in this case when we are using numerical variables, but the use case of while loops is different than for loops. So echo and then I. Now if we execute this, let's keep a br tag as well. Okay, now if we execute this, this will print out values up to 5. So pretty simple. First you initialize a variable's value, then you define a looping condition for which this block of code inside the curly braces will execute, and then you define an exit condition or an increment or decrement value. The for loop is compact and powerful. It lets you define 3 things in one line. So beginners might find this easy as well or convenient. Now of course this is not the only way you can use a for loop. You don't only have to print out values of variables. You can also modify those variable values and print it out. So if I typed out I plus 2, it would give out to 3, then 5 and so on. So let's see. Okay, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So now if you want to use another version of for, it is for each. And a for each loop is tailor-made for arrays. Instead of worrying about indexes, it gives you each value directly one by one. Super useful when you have to show a list of items, or if you want to send emails to users or render navigation menus. So it is useful for them. It's clean, readable, and beginner friendly as well. So let me show you how a for each loop works. So first let's define an array called fruits. And then we'll type out apple, and then after that banana, and then cherry, let's see, semicolon, and after that instead of for we will use for each. So for each, since we are iterating the array called fruits, for each fruits as an individual fruit. For each fruit, we will echo out fruit. Then dot our br tag. Now, let's reload. And we'll see that every fruit inside our fruits array has been iterated. So let me just push this to the side. Okay. So this is how you use a for each loop. You can access each individual element of fruits as a fruit and echo that out. So this can be useful when iterating through arrays. Now those were basically the for loop and its variation for each loop, and while loop and the do while loop. But we have another topic left for this video, and that is the break statement and continue statement. So the break statement basically says enough and exit the loop right now. So first of all, let's create a for loop once again. So for our initial variable I equals 1, and then I equals, or let's say less than or equals to 10, and then I plus plus. If our value of I, so $i, is equal to 5, let's say we want to break the loop. Now this is a single line, but let's properly follow its syntax. And yeah, okay. Now, suppose you want to stop a loop at a certain point, right? Suppose if the value of I is 5, you want to break out of the loop and execute the remaining code. So you don't want to go full way. That is where the break statement comes in. Now if I type out echo and then the value of I and then concatenate a br tag, let's see what happens. So as expected, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it ignores this condition each time the value of I is not 5 and just goes on to this bit of code. It echoes out the value of I. So 1, 2, 3, 4. But after the increment is implemented and the value of I becomes 5, this condition is fulfilled. So it breaks out of the loop. Okay, and then it executes the rest of the code. So that is how a break statement works. Now suppose you want to skip I equals to 5. So when the value of I reaches a certain value, you want to skip it. That's where the continue statement comes in. If I use continue, it will skip the rest of the code that is below this continue statement. So inside our for loop, whatever statement is below our continue, it will skip that and it will increase the value of I by 1 and it will start from a new iteration. So this should output to 1, 2, 3, 4. It will skip the value of 5 since we have written a continue, and then it will keep on going to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. So like I said, 1, 2, 3, 4. After I reaches 5, this continue statement will execute. All of this will be skipped, and then the value of I will become 6, and the loop runs once again. So that is how the continue statement works. Now let's look at some practical examples. Suppose you have to print out even numbers from 1 to 10. What would you do? You would run a loop, of course. So in this case, we will be using a for loop since we know up to where we have to iterate. We have to iterate till 10. So actually this remaining for loop or this predefined for loop condition works just fine. We have to start from, okay, let's comment out our question. Print even numbers from 1 to 5 and 1 to 10. So we have initialized the value of our loop variable to 1. So we'll be starting from 1 and we'll be ending at 10. So this is perfect. For printing out values, for printing out even values, we'll use if the $, and then I, if our value of I is even. So if when divided by 2 it leaves no remainder. So this is a modulus operator, if you know from our previous video, expressions and control statements. So if our remainder when dividing by 2 is 0, that basically means the number is even. We will echo out the number. So echo our number, so I, and then once again the br tag. Okay. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So that is it. Now let's say we want to skip the value of 6. Comment down or leave your guesses in the comments below on what do we have to do if we want to skip the value of 6. Or let's say if we want to not print out any numbers from 6 to 10. Now of course you can apply here foo and that will do the trick, but the solution is one of the break and continue statements. So I hope you guys know what to do if you encounter this type of problem. And that wraps up loops in PHP. We explored the while loop, the do while loop, the for loop, and for each loop. Plus, we also explored how to control them using break and continue. In the next video, we'll be going deeper into arrays because that's where you'll store and manage your data in PHP. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, make sure you drop a like, comment how you like the video or what the answers are to the questions I just asked you, or what could have been better in the video, or any questions that you might have. That's a lot of ors, so okay, I'll stop it there, and we'll see you in the next episode. Until then, happy coding and bye bye. Hello everyone and welcome back to the PHP Basics series, and in today's episode 5, we're diving into something super important, that are arrays. Arrays are how PHP stores multiple values in a single variable. We'll look at indexed arrays, associative arrays, and multidimensional arrays, and how to loop through them. Plus, I will share some essential array functions that will make your life a lot easier. So let's jump right in. First of all, what are arrays? Arrays are just a variable which I use to store multiple items. First, let's start with an indexed array, which is just a normal array. Now, first let me start my Apache server and then go into my htdocs folder, and inside htdocs I have opened VS Code inside PHP Basics, and this is the code from our previous video. Now, in order to explain indexed arrays, I'll have to make an indexed array. So first I'll make an array called colors, and inside this we can store items using comma. So we can store multiple items, right? And to store or group those items we use a square bracket. So inside we will be storing the names of colors, so those will be strings. So we'll use a set of double quotes, and we'll be storing first of all red. This is one item, and after that, in order to store another item, I'll use a comma and then another set of quotation marks, so green and blue, right? So these are three items that I stored inside an array, and this is what arrays do. They store multiple items. So these are just simple lists where each item is assigned a number starting from 0. It's like numbering boxes on a shelf. So this box will get a number of 0, this will get a number of 1, and this will get a number of 2. Now, if we want to access any of these boxes, we will have to use their respective index along with the name of their array. So suppose we want to access green, right? Now, if you remember, 0 and then 1. So this is green's number is 1. So if you want to access that green string, we'll have to type out echo colors, and then in our square brackets we'll have to type out its index. So since its index is 1, I'll type out 1 and hit a semicolon. Now if we want to check these results, if we want to check these results, I'll go on to type out localhost and then the name of our folder and the name of our file. So it echoes out green. So if you want to access blue, 2. Now if we refresh, it accesses blue. So yeah, that is how you access elements inside an array. Now, index arrays are great for storing things like lists of colors, scores, or product names. And they're easy to create and super useful when you need a sequence of items. Moving on from index arrays, we have associative arrays, and it's a bit different from what index arrays are. Inside associative arrays, instead of using numbers, we use named keys, kind of like labeling each box with a word instead of a number. So if we create an array called a person, this is an associative array, so we'll be using indexes. So we'll be using keys. So first of all, our key will be name, and then an arrow symbol, and then its value, our name's value, will be Alice. After that, a comma, and another key will be age, and its value will be a number, which will be 25. Okay, and after that, let's end this with a semicolon. And now, instead of saying index 0, we say name, and it gives us Alice. This is perfect for data that has structure like user profiles, settings, or any object that can have any property. And it's much easier to remember a key, suppose age, rather than what an index might be. So like I said, if I want to access a person's name, we can do it just in the way of an index. So we can do echo and then person, and inside our square brackets, instead of its index, we'll type out its key, so name. Now this should give out Alice if we refresh, as you can see. So associative arrays make your code more readable and meaningful, and that is all about associative arrays. Now if you combine simple arrays, that is index arrays, or multiple arrays, or both, we can get multidimensional arrays. And multidimensional arrays is just a fancy word for arrays inside arrays. Now in the example I'm going to present, first let me make a multidimensional array. So first of all, I'll make an array called students. First of all, create an array, and inside this array I'll create another array, and this will be an associative array. So name, and the value of name will be Bob, and then let's say Bob's age, a comma, and let's say Bob's age is 20. After that, I'll create another array, and inside it'll have the same properties, that is our keys. So name, and name's value will be Jane. So Jane's age will be 22. Oh, I'm sorry, I should close the square bracket here. So these are our two arrays inside another array, students. So students is an array of a list of students, right? An array of students, and this each array is the student's details, that is its name and age. So it is an array of details inside an array of students. I hope you get that. Now in this example, each student is an associative array with their name and age, and they're all inside one big index array. So this array has an index of 0, this has an index of 1, but inside this array, this doesn't have an index, it has a key and value pair. So think of it like a spreadsheet. Each row is a student and each column is a detail. Now just be careful of how much nesting you do, because if you nest too deeply, it can get tricky to manage. As for accessing, if we want to access our specific student's name, Bob, we'll have to do it like this. If we type out echo and then students, and inside our square brackets, if we type out 0, look what it is accessing at first. If we leave it at this much, this line of code will access this particular item in students array. But if we want to access Bob, that is the value of our key name, we'll have to type out inside square brackets name as well. Now, if I type out a semicolon and then hit refresh, it'll access Bob. And same goes with age. If I want to access the age of Bob, I will have to type out age. If I want to access the age of Jane, I'll have to change the indexed array, because this is in the first, that is the second position, but it is in the index of 1. So I'll have to type out 1, and if I refresh, this will give 22. So that is what a multidimensional array is. Now you've learned the basics of what the types of arrays are in PHP. Let's learn how to loop them. We have already discussed about looping through arrays in our 4th episode, that is loops. Now you can go check it out. But long story short, you do it through the use of for each loop. Now, if I create the array from before, that is colors, I'll do it in 2 ways. So first of all, colors will have red and then green. Let's end this with a semicolon. Now, if I want to loop through this array of colors, I'll have to use a for each loop. Let's comment this out, and I'll show you the syntax. So for each we'll have to write first the name of the array. For each colors as a color, an individual color, we will echo out that color. So this is the syntax of a for each loop. First you have to write the name of the array that you're looping through, then the individual item that will be stored in this variable. So red will be stored in this variable, it will be echoed out. After that it will move on to green, and the same process repeats. Now if we hit refresh, it will give out red, then green, then blue. Now of course we don't have a BR tag, so this will give all of this in the same line. But if we do this, it will give out red, green, and blue. Now that is for looping through an index array. But if we have to loop through an associative array, there's a different method for that. Now let's leave this multidimensional array and create a simple array. Okay, if we create a simple array using this name, so this is an associative array. If we want to loop through this, we'll have to use the for each in a different syntax. Since this does not contain just indexed items, it also contains names, that is keys and values. We'll have to use a different format of for each. So for each, we'll say person as its key and its value. So each individual key, that is a name, so let's say this name will first be stored as key, and Bob, which is a value, will be stored in value. So this is how you loop through an associative array. So echo out $key, a colon, and then $value. Let's also join in a BR tag. Now let's comment this out and hit refresh. This should be students. Okay, now it works. I mistook this as person, I'm sorry. Okay, so this is how you loop through an associative array. So using a for each loop makes it easy to display data like names, prices, or user details, and no need to mess with manual indexing. Now, since you have learned how to loop through arrays, I will show you some useful array functions, and I'll start from count. So we'll take our colors as an example. If you want to know how many items are in an array, we use count. Now how you do that is, first you create a variable called count, and then use our count array function and a set of parentheses and the array that you want to count the items of. So if you type this out, it should output to 3, since there are 3 items in our colors array. Oh, I did not echo out count, so it did not output to anything. So if we do this, it should output to 3. Now if we add another color called yellow, it should output to 4 since there are 4 items. And that is how you use count. It tells you how many items there are in an array. If you want to add an item to the end of an array, you use array push. So array push the name of the array you want to push into, that is colors, and the item that you want to push. So let's say purple. And this adds the item to the array. Now if we echo out colors, so echo colors, it should give out. Okay, I forgot about that. Let's use a for each loop. So for each, and then colors as color, we will echo out the colors with a br tag as well. So as you can see, it outputs purple as well. So purple has been added, and that too at the end of an array. So that is how you use array push. And meanwhile, unset is used to remove items from an array. So comment this all out, and then after that I'll use unset. So after using unset, and then the array you want to remove it from, so colors, and the indexed item that you want to remove. So for suppose you want to remove green, you can type out its index. So 1 is the index of green. This line essentially removes green from our colors array. And now to demonstrate that, I'll uncomment this, cut it, and paste it below this. So let's see. So as you can see, it has removed green. So it's red, blue, and then yellow only. Okay, that is how you use unset. If you wanted to remove blue, you could type out 2, and then blue would be removed. If you wanted to remove yellow, you could type out 3, and then yellow will be removed. So that is how you use unset. Now for our final array function, it's in array. It checks whether or not a given item or a string or any item is in an array. So first of all, you comment all this. I'll comment all this, and then I'll store it in a variable called contains. I'll use in underscore array. So let's see if red is in our array of colors. So colors, this should be colors, and then after that we'll echo out contains. It outputs to 1, which is essentially true. So you'll use these functions all the time, especially when building forms, shopping carts, or anything with dynamic content. An awesome job! Today you learned how to create and manage different types of arrays. Those were indexed, associative, and multidimensional arrays. And you also learned how to loop through them and use powerful built-in functions. And as arrays are foundations for storing and organizing data in PHP, mastering them is a big step forward. And in the next episode, we will be covering functions, how to write reusable blocks of code to keep your programs clean and efficient. Thanks for watching, and see you later. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the PHP series. In this episode of the PHP series, that is episode 6, we are going to be diving into a core concept in PHP, which are functions. Now, in this episode, you'll learn how to declare them, pass parameters, return values, and use default arguments in a function. If you have written JavaScript code before, a lot of this will feel familiar. But PHP does have some of its own rules. So let's jump right in. First of all, I will open my XAMPP Apache server, and then I'll start writing some PHP code. So first of all, I'll show you guys a default, just a syntax of how to declare a function. First, you write the function keyword, then you name your function. My function will be named say hello, and then inside our curly braces, we will write the code that is to be executed when this function is called. So let's say when I call say hello, I want it to literally say hello. So echo hello and an exclamation mark. So all this function does is it says hello. It prints out hello onto our web page. So in order to call our function, we would type out say hello, its function name, a set of parentheses, and then close. Now this will output to hello. Now in order to check that, I'll open my localhost link, and as expected, it does say hello. Do keep in mind that for a function to execute its code, you have to call it. So if I don't call this function, the code will not execute. So it'll just be blank. So that's how you use functions. Pretty simple, right? Function names can contain letters, numbers, and underscores, but must start with a letter or an underscore. So it can't start with a number, or else it will throw you an error. Also, PHP function names are not case sensitive, though it's a good habit to stay consistent. So say hello and say hello are essentially the same, but it's nice and consistent to use a casing or a casing of your choice. And unlike JavaScript, PHP lets you define your functions after they are called, because it parses all the function definitions before running the code. So if I call this function before I declare it, it should still execute fine. Now what we just discussed before was a really basic function. This function just says hello and that's about it. But functions can also accept parameters that are values passed into them. So inside a function, you work with those values and you can return a result. So let's say I call this function here, and I call this greet user, okay? And I pass in a parameter of name. So let's say name, and I use name over here, right? Now what happens is when you call a function using an argument, which is a value passed when you call a function. So suppose I pass a value called Sam, right? Now what happens is this value that we pass into a function when we call it takes the place of the parameter and is essentially used inside the function wherever that value is called. So instead of hello name, it prints out to hello Sam, and let's see what happens. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to change. Okay, my bad. I forgot to change the name of. Okay, so this should output to hello Sam. Okay, I thought I made a mistake there. I did make a mistake. I thought I didn't know what mistake was there. So these are what you call parameters. In this case, the function greets our user, whatever name is passed into this. So if I type in Bob, this is return hello Bob. So pretty simple, right? Another case of using parameters is let's suppose we declare a function called add, and inside add we send in our two values to be added. So these are parameters, the values that you pass into a function which will be used later. So let's say we return a function, return a value of a plus b, and this is the return keyword. This returns a value from a function when you call it. So suppose I echo add and then 2 and 3. Now as I explained before, this is in a serial way, so this is in order. First, since we have passed 2 first, and since we have defined a first, 2 will take the value of a, and it's the other way around. A will take the value of 2 and B will take the value of 3. So it will return 2 plus 3 since A and B are returned. So 2 plus 3, it should return to 5. Now let's see. Okay, here's 5. So that's how parameters and return values in a function work. So this is pretty similar to JavaScript, but do notice that we don't need to use let or const for parameters in PHP. And you can also use type hints to ensure the values are of the correct type. So if you want to ensure the value passed in are integers, you can use int and int before a and b. And if you want to make sure that the value that is returned is an integer, you can type out a column before our curly braces and int. So this will make sure that it returns an integer. This is optional, but it helps catch bugs early. Okay, Now that you know about passing parameters in a function, let's talk about default parameters. Default parameters means that you can set default values for your parameters. So if no value is passed when you call a function, the default value is used. Let's say we use this greet user function once again, but instead of just passing in name, we can set a default value for name. So let's say we keep a default value for name as guest. Now, I have called our, okay, I'll comment this add function out so that I can display it clearly. Now, as you can see, I have passed Bob as a parameter, or when you pass, okay, one quick tip or a fun fact, when you pass in values while calling a function, this is not called a parameter, but it is called an argument. So when you pass in an argument, it is definitely used in place of the parameter. There's no doubt in that, right? So hello Bob is printed out. But if you don't want to pass in a specific value, you can set a default value to be used in place of a parameter. So if I don't pass any value while calling this greet user function, it will default to hello guest. So if no value is passed, the guest value will be used in place of name. And that is what default parameters are all about. But you do have to consider one important rule while using default parameters. That is, default parameters must always come after required ones. So for example, if I use this default parameter, it's fine, right? But if I pass in another parameter called message, and I use the message value inside our code, this will result in an error. So if I pass in a message, I hope you are doing well, you might think that it'll just use name, that is guest, in place of name, but it'll definitely use this message, right? But this will result in an error. So if we just simply change the order of our parameters, that is, if we keep our default parameter at the end, let's see what happens, shall we? See, it defaults to guest while using name, but it prints out our message. So please keep in mind that default parameters should be passed in at the end. And that is why the order you pass in your parameters or the order you call your arguments works well. So if I use Bob, it should output to hello Bob, I hope you are doing well. So I hope everything is clear and understood. Now, we have learned the basic gist of how you can use functions and how you can use parameters and also use default parameters. Now let's apply everything we have learned so far, not only in this episode, but in this whole series, and build something simple. That is, we're going to be building a real world mini project, a calculator. And we'll be building a calculator with a function called calculator. Now this function will take in three parameters, our two values that we are going to operate with and the operator that we are going to use. So first of all, let's declare our calculator function, so calculator, and this will take in three parameters. Like I said, first of all, variable a, let's be more descriptive, num1, our second number num2, and then our operator, so let's call it op. Okay, so operator. Now if, let's say this is a pretty simple calculator, so calculator that performs basic arithmetics. Okay, so first of all, if our operator's value op is equal to a plus symbol, we will return num1 plus num2. So pretty simple. We'll be using this very logic throughout our calculator. Else if our OP's value, so operator, is equal to minus, we will return num1 minus num2. Now I'll copy this line about 2 times, since one is for after subtraction, one is for, oh, didn't mean to do this. Now where was I? So first for multiplying and then for division. So we'll just change the operators. If the operator is an asterisk sign, we will return the multiplication, so asterisk sign. And then for our division, we will do a bit something different. So first of all, we'll check if our second operator, if our second parameter, that is the dividing number, that is the divisor, is 0 or not. So if our num2 is not equal to 0, we will just return a divided by, num1 divided by num2. But if our num2 is equal to 0, that is this condition is false, we will pass in a message that cannot divide by 0. Now if you remember from our control statements episode, this is the ternary operator. That is, this is, okay, let me just, okay. First of all, this is a condition. We are checking if num2 is not equal to 0. Is not equal to 0. If num2 is not equal to 0, then fine, we'll just return the quotient, that is num1 divided by num2. But if it is equal to 0, that is after colon, we will pass in a message that you cannot divide by 0. And after all these else ifs, we'll use an else. That is, this is a simple calculator. So if the user, or if we pass in any arguments other than these 4 symbols, we'll just say invalid operator. Okay, and then end this. Now this is our complete mini calculator function. Now let's test it out. So first of all, we'll echo calculator, and then we'll pass in 2, 3, and then plus, let's say at first. So it should output to 5. Let's see. Okay, 5. Now at the same place, if we do minus, it should output to -1. 2 times 3, and that is multiplication, it should output to 6. And if we use the dividing operator, it will give us the quotient. Now let's see if it handles our division by 0. So cannot divide by 0. And for one final check, what if we pass in an invalid operator? So let's say we pass in p. Now what does it say? It says invalid operator. So depending on the operator, it performs the correct calculation and returns the result. And notice how we even handle the division by 0 error, which is a common edge case. So this kind of utility function is very useful, and I hope you get the gist of how we can use functions with this example. Okay, and that's about it for this video. You know how to write and use functions in PHP, and functions help keep your code modular, reusable, and easier to manage, especially as your projects grow. And in the next episode, we'll be exploring superglobals like the get and post method, and how PHP handles data sent through forms, URLs, and more. So this is where your pages start reacting to user input. So it's a key step in making interactive PHP sites. So hope you stay tuned and wait for our next video. If you found this video helpful and informative, please do leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and we'll be pushing out such videos later. So until then, bye bye and happy coding. Hey folks, and welcome back to the PHP series. Today we're going to explore a super important part of PHP, and those are superglobals. These are special variables that let your PHP scripts talk to forms, understand user input, and even learn about the environment that they are running in. Suppose the server, browser, or request method. So let's break down the most commonly used superglobals with real-world examples. First of all, what even are superglobals? Superglobals are built-in PHP variables that are always available anywhere in your code. They may be inside your code, that is inside functions, or outside functions. And you don't need to declare them or pass them around, so think of them as PHP's global inboxes. They automatically receive information from users, browsers, forms, and server. Some of the most useful ones include the get superglobal. This grabs data from the URL, and post grabs data from the submitted forms, and server provides information about the server and requests. So let's get started with get and post first. Always remember, I have turned on my Apache server from XAMPP, and I have opened my PHP basics folder from htdocs inside the XAMPP folder in my local C drive, and this is index.php. Now, in order to show you a demo of the get and post method or the superglobals, first we will have to create an HTML file. Now, let's take a look at two ways a form can send data. One of them is get and another is post. So first we'll create an HTML file to demonstrate that. We'll name this index.html. Inside this we'll write the boilerplate, and let's name the title of the document Superglobals. Globals. Let me just make this big for you guys and put this to the side, and then this to the side as well. So first of all, Superglobals. Now inside the body we'll create a form. Okay, so the form will have the method, and this will have the get method. As you can see, it auto completes, and the target, that is the action of this form, will be our index.php file. So this will send information to our index.php file. Now in our input fields we'll put the type of text. Let's say we want to obtain the name of a person, so we'll say name colon, and then we'll put the type as text. Okay, so text, I'll close this, and then we'll put this name. It's essentially like giving it a key, so it's name. We'll close the tag, and we will put another input tag, and this will be like a submit button, so its type will be submit. Okay, now what will happen is when we load up this HTML through our localhost and enter our name and hit submit, this information, the name that we entered, will be sent through the get method to our PHP file, index.php file. So in our URL it will contain, okay, I'll just show you guys. Okay, first of all, I'll say localhost, and instead of index.php we'll open index.html. Now as you can see, the name, this name is here, our input field is here. Let's say this has a placeholder as well, so it will prompt the user to please enter your name. Okay, and refresh. So please enter your name. Now I had tested this before as well, so I'll put my name here. Now I hit submit, and okay, for now we have been directed to our index.php page. Now if you have noticed, along with our localhost, our folder name, and our index.php, that is our file name, we have some more information. Now this is what you call a query string. And inside this query string, this is like sending data through our URL. So since we are using the get method, we will send our name, that is this name, through our URL, and this name will be the name that we enter in the text field. So I entered Swayam Raj Bhandari, so that is my name, and this will be, sent through our URL. Now if we want to use this value in our PHP file, we can do it like this. First of all, we'll go to our PHP, and down here, and first we'll create a variable for our name. So let's say we make a variable called name equals, and here we will access this key value pair. So we'll do it by using our super global, that is $_get, and inside our square brackets we will put in the value of the key, so name. Now essentially Swayam Raj Bhandari, that is a name, is put inside this. Okay, and after that we'll put a semicolon, and then we will access that. So echo, let's say your name is, and then name. So save and then reload. So see, now suppose, okay, let's go back to our index.html file. Oh, I'm sorry, index.html. Okay, now if we enter here, let's say Sam, submit, your name is Sam. So that is how the get method works. And the get method is great for things like search queries, filters, or bookmarks, because the data is visible in the URL, so name equals Sam. Now let's talk about post. Post is a bit different from get. So if we put the method here as post, and we go back to our index.html file and reload this, now let's type out Sam once again and see what happens. Oh, of course we have to use here post instead of get, so _post. Now if we submit this form, Your name is Sam still appears, that is our value that was inputted into the input field is still being accessed through a key value pair type mechanism, that is through our post superglobal. But you might have noticed that the string does not contain any data that we entered. So unlike get, post hides the data from the URL, and that makes it the better choice for sensitive data like passwords, login forms, or private messages. So rule of thumb is use get when you're retrieving data. That is, you want to retrieve or read data that is sent via the URL and the data isn't sensitive, and you want the link to be shareable or bookmarkable. Those are the cases when you use get, but you should use post when you are submitting data. So that typically includes sensitive information and data that isn't or shouldn't be included in the URL. So those are how the get and post method work. Now, after the get and post methods, let's talk about our another superglobal, that is server. Server is another powerful superglobal. It gives you access to the server info, request details, and more. And here are some useful examples. First of all, if we just type out echo $_server, oh, I meant to type server, and then inside our big braces or big brackets, if we type PHP _self and then close it, after we load our index.php, localhost index.php, it will show us our server info. So it will show us our current script folder and our current script name. We are running this script, that is this web page from index.php, so it will show it just that. Now if we use a request method, request _method, hit refresh, it outputs to post. Now along with this request method, I will type other server superglobal examples. So if we use echo and then _server, and then inside our server superglobal, let's turn on our caps lock. If we use http _user agent, we will see, or we will get to see, the browser info. So let's refresh this. Yes, see, so we get to see our browser info. And if we do echo, let's add a br tag here as well. So and okay, if we do $_server, and then if we do server name, it outputs to the host name of the server. So localhost, since we are using localhost, it will output to localhost, that is our server name. So these are useful for debugging, creating dynamic redirects, or detecting user devices. You'll often use server and request method to check how the user submitted the form, and that brings us to form validation. So let's talk about two really helpful functions you'll often use in validation. There is isSet. First of all, we'll write isSet. So isSet checks if a variable is declared and not null. So basically, if a variable is declared or it is not null, it returns true. So if isSet and then $_post, and then inside our brackets we use username, let's say it should output to user name is set, else it will say username, let me type out echo, and username is not set. So what do you think will happen? I think it will output to username is not set, because if you notice inside our HTML form, okay, let me just shorten this. if you notice inside our HTML form, we have not passed in anything called a username. Even when our string will load, our index.php will load, our query string will contain name equals and whatever the name we enter inside the form. So since our username is not set, this should output. Okay, let's first of all load index.html. The index.php page should output to username not set. So even if we pass it this, okay, seems like I missed semicolons. Okay, never mind that. It'll output to username is not set because we have not passed anything called a username. Now if we pass something called a username and then load up our HTML page once again and send in our username, it'll output a username is set because we have defined such a variable. So that is how you use the isSet method. And now as for empty checks if a variable has empty or a falsy value, like let's say an empty string or 0 or null, right? Null and false. So let's say we do make a username value, but we do not pass in anything. So instead of Sam, I don't enter anything, right? Now let's check if we'll create another if condition. If empty, and then we'll use $_post once again, and username. If our username value is empty, we'll say echo please enter your username. Else, let's say we will say username is set, not even username is set. Let's say echo username is, and no, let's just echo out the username. So echo $_post and then a username, okay, and a semicolon. Now let's reload the page and try to submit nothing. So it will say please enter your username. Since we have not entered anything in our username parameter, key, so it returns a false or an empty value, right? So our empty function checks if the form field that we entered is empty or not, and if it is empty, it will echo out please enter your name. So if we pass in, let's say Sam, it will just output to Sam. But if we pass in an empty value, okay, for some reason it keeps loading, so it will output to please enter your username. So that is basic form validation, right? And basic form validation is made easy by isSet and empty. So I hope you guys understand that. And that was it for today. Now you know how PHP receives input from the browser, whether it is from URLs, that is from our get method, or from forms, that is our post method, or server information, that is from our $_server variable or superglobal. So these superglobals are the foundation for creating interactive websites. In the next episode, we'll be going deeper into how PHP and MySQL can work together, and we'll work on PHP and MySQL integration. So if you found the video helpful or like the video, make sure you drop a like, subscribe to the channel so that you can stay updated on our videos. And until then, until the next episode, bye bye. Hello everybody and welcome back to the series, the PHP series. So far we have explored how PHP handles logic, functions, arrays and forms. But everything we have done has been temporary. Once the page reloads, our data is gone. So now it's time to make your PHP apps dynamic and persistent. And we do that by connecting them to a database. And the most common database used with PHP is MySQL. It is powerful, reliable, and works seamlessly with PHP. So let's integrate the two and take your apps to the next level. So before writing any PHP code, let's make sure your setup is ready. So I have opened up XAMPP and started the Apache server. So this is to run our PHP code on a local server. You know this from our previous videos if you watched them. And this is MySQL. So this will be our database server. And then XAMPP also gives us a platform called a PHP MyAdmin, and it is a visual tool to interact with MySQL easily. So to begin, of course, in your devices, you have to open XAMPP. You have to start both Apache and MySQL, and once they're running, you can write your code. So I'll tell you how to access PHP MyAdmin. Well, I'll just show you right now. You just have to type out localhost/php and then MyAdmin. When you click enter, this is the UI of your database. So these are your databases: test database, PHP MyAdmin, and we'll create a new database right here. But first, let's open our VS Code and our AC docs folder, our previous index PHP basics folder, and index.php. So inside this, we'll write some PHP code to connect a database using MySQL Connect. So first, let's create a variable called con, and this will stand for connection, and this will equal to this is the method that we run. So MySQL and underscore connect, and inside the parentheses, first you will write the server name, and because we are running the local host, we'll write localhost. This is your server name, and then your username, and this is the default username in XAMPP. So root is the default username, and then your password, and the default password is set to blank since there is no password. And we'll create in this PHP MyAdmin, that is in our MySQL, we'll create a database called testdb, that stands for test database. So at the end, you write the name of the database that you want to connect to, so testdb, and after that we'll end it with a semicolon. Let's just set this aside. Okay, end this with a semicolon, and then we will see if the database connection was successful or not. So this will return a true or false result, right? This connection, this attempt to connect will return a true or false result in con. So we'll say if not true, that is if not con, we will terminate, that is die. This is to terminate the current script immediately. So if our connection fails, we'll use die, and we'll write connection failed, and then a MySQL connect error. So MySQL connect and underscore error. So it will print out what error was there. And else, if our connection was successful, that is this die won't run, die script won't run. So we'll have to echo out connected to the database successfully. Okay, I've made it pretty clear. Okay, this is to connect our database. Once again, this is the server, this is the username, but it is defaulted to root in XAMPP. This is where you put the password, and later this will come in handy if you want to connect a database. So and this is our database name. Now if our connection is not successful, our whole script will terminate with this die, and it will print out a message as to why the connection failed. So that is how the script works. Now let's set up our database in PHP MyAdmin. So in your browser, like I said, you have to go to localhost/php MyAdmin, and this interface will open up, and then you have to click on new. And in our database, as we said, we are going to connect this database, testdb. So we'll type out testdb, and then we'll click create. So as you can see, database has been created, right? Now in this test database, let's create some columns. So let's say number of columns is 3 for now, and table name, let's create a table called users. Create, and now inside this table name we'll add some fields. First we'll add an ID. The ID will be of an integer type, and we'll set it to, we'll set its index to primary, since it has to have a primary key, and go. And after that, this stands for auto increment, so we'll tick auto increment since the ID has to increase as items are being added. So after ID, we'll click a name. This will be of the type of varchar, and the length will be 100. And that is pretty much it. We don't need to mess with any other values. So, and after that, we'll enter an email. This will also be varchar and of 100. Yes. So we'll click save, and like that our table has been created. So this is the users table, and this has an ID, a name, and an email as its column values. So great, now we've got a users table ready to store some data. Now let's use PHP to insert new user data into our table. So the connection will be the same, but instead of printing out a message that we have connected to the database successfully, let's comment this out. We will insert a name variable. Let's say the name is Bob, and then we'll insert an email variable. So email equals bob@example.com, and this. And now we will create, I don't know if you're familiar with SQL queries, but basically you can operate and insert data, select data, delete data, all using SQL queries. So it's just like a bit of code that you write into your SQL query section, and SQL will do the work for you. So first of all, we'll create an SQL query inside a string. So SQL, will name it SQL, and give this quotation marks for the string. And SQL queries are written in caps lock, so I'll turn the caps lock on and insert. First of all, we'll insert into our table name. So insert into is what table are we going to insert it? So into. So we're going to insert into users. So I've named the table users. So insert into users. And what are we going to insert? We're going to insert name and then email. So name and email. And what values are we going to keep in this column? So we're going to insert the values of $name and then $email. So we're going to insert Bob and bob@example.com. So $email. Now after that, so we have written the query, right? But we have not executed it with MySQL yet. So in order to execute this MySQL query, we will use something called MySQLi query. But in order to handle errors, we'll use this inside an if statement. So if MySQLi underscore query. Now first we'll write the name of the connection that we established with our database earlier, since it has to know which database is it connected to. So since it's connected to testDB and we have written this here, we'll write the con, that is connection variable, at first, and after that the query that you want to run. So SQL, we want to run this query, right? Now after that we'll print out a message if the query was successful. So again, this query will also return a Boolean value. So if it was successful, we'll say new user added. Let's put a semicolon. I hope I have not missed any semicolons. Okay, and else we will echo out error first. Error. We'll end the string, and then we'll concatenate MySQLi error underscore error and the database which we have connected to. So that's about it. Now let's load up localhost and our folder name and index.php. Okay, so it does say new user added. So that means this data that we just entered and run a query has been inserted into our users table. So let's refresh and check. So in our users table, we can see that ID is 1, so it is defaulted, it is auto increment as well. So ID is 1 by default, and name we have inserted Bob and bob@example.com. So we have successfully inserted data into our database, all with PHP. So you just created and inserted a user record. And quick note, we're using a raw SQL here, but in projects you'll want to use prepared statements to prevent SQL injection. So we'll cover that in an advanced episode. Now, we have inserted data into our table. Let's fetch the data with select. So the way we will be fetching data or reading data from our table will be by using a select query. So first of all, let's comment all of this out since our username and email has already been inserted. So even if I comment this out, our database won't change since this query has already been run. Now we'll create another query in the same SQL variable, which will, first of all, let's write MySQLi and then first we'll write select. This will be our query. Select star, this means select everything from our table name, that is users. So now we'll run this query in a variable called result. So MySQLi query and then the name of our connection, so con, and then the name of our query. Now this will give us results in rows. Just like we have one row of data here, there can be multiple rows. So suppose, okay, let's comment this. Let's say we have Alice and then Alice at example.com. Okay, and if we run this and refresh this, we should have Alice. Okay, suppose we have two rows of data, right? Now what select returns is rows of data, that is rows of information of our database. So we will run an if statement. So if, now we have something called MySQLi underscore num underscore rows. Now what inside this we will write a result which contains the select query. Now what this means is as long as this query, this select star from users query is returning us rows, as long as MySQLi num rows is more than 0, that is it is returning results, that is it is returning these rows, it will execute first of all while, and we'll store those rows in a variable called row equals. Now we also have something called MySQLi underscore fetch underscore assoc and then result. Now what this does is it converts the MySQL rows into associative arrays. So MySQLi fetch rows and it's like saying MySQLi fetch data from MySQL and then convert them into associative arrays. So now we discussed about associative arrays in our previous episodes. It's an array that has a key and value pair. So we will first of all echo our ID and then we'll concat our, first of all, since our $row is now an associative array, we will access its key. We'll access its value by its key. So since we have ID here, we'll type in ID and let's concatenate and let's type out its name as well. So name and then colon space, then we'll concatenate our name, so name, and we'll repeat the same process with email. So name and then concatenate our email and dot, and inside row we will type out our email key, so email, right? Now we have closed our while loop, and after that we'll execute our else condition. So else, so this is the condition where no data is returned. That means no data is in the database from our select query. So we'll type out echo no users found. So why I wrote no users found is if there are no rows, if there are no rows more than 0, that means there are no rows at all, right? So yeah, that is how you select data. Now let's close this. So MySQLi underscore close and close our connection. So this is important if you want to establish another connection to another database. So you have to close your previous connection. Now let's it is on autosave, so we don't have to save. So let's, okay, I think we're missing a semicolon somewhere. So let me just expand this and see. Oh yep, MySQL fetch a source undefined variable. Huh. Oh, I put in a variable. This should be and the mistake. Okay. Once again, see daisies. Okay, so yeah. First of all, we have ID one name Bob and bob@example.com, and let's also add a br statement here. So br. So yeah, it has fetched our data from our database, Alice and Bob and Alice. So that is how you can view all of the users directly from your browser. So you've just completed the first major step in building a real-world web application with PHP. We have connected to MySQL, we have created a database and a table, and inserted and retrieved data using PHP. Now in the next episode, we'll not just create and read data, we will update and delete data as well. Now of course, for now you can delete your data and edit your data with here, PHP MyAdmin UI as well. We'll delete this and Bob will be deleted. So, but later on, you can, so we have only Alice remaining, but later on we'll be doing that all with PHP only. So hope you stay tuned for that, and if you liked the video or found it helpful, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye. Hello everybody and welcome to the PHP series. This is episode 9 and this episode is all about CRUD operations with PHP and MySQL. So in the previous episode we connected our database with PHP, that is PHP with MySQL, and now it's time for the real fun, that is CRUD operations. So if you haven't checked out episode 8, you will miss some of the things that I explained regarding creating a table, in fact creating a database and creating a table inside the database, inserting data into table and reading data from the table. So we have explored the CR part of CRUD, that is CRUD, but CRUD basically stands for create, read, update and delete. So these 4 actions form the backbone of every dynamic website, and these are basically the bare minimum, right? So these are present in social media and even e-commerce platforms. So today we'll write code for each one using PHP and MySQL. So let's jump right in. Now first we'll start with the create part. So inside create we will be inserting data just like in episode 1. So this is discussed in episode 1, but if you're new to this, episode 8, but if you're new to this, I'll just I have opened our previous file from our episode 8 and I had commented that code, so I will just uncomment this. Now if we set up Bob and then bob@example.com. So this is how it works basically. First you create a variable called con, this is our connection variable, and then we use something called MySQLi connect. And inside MySQLi connect we enter 4 parameters. First is our server name. Since we're using XAMPP and localhost, it will be localhost, and this will be our username. And the default username in XAMPP is root, so we have entered root. This is for password, and since the default password is nothing in XAMPP, we have entered an empty string. And finally our database to be connected. Now let me just push this to the side, and okay, just so you know, I have opened up Apache server and MySQL from XAMPP. So if I type out here php localhost /myadmin php myadmin, it will open up the database and php myadmin UI. So like I said, we had previously created this database through new. So we have connected our PHP with this database right here. And inside this, we had created a table called users. Now inside this, there's already present an ID, name, and email, basically a row of data called Alice. But here we have run the query using Bob. So first of all, if the connection, once again I'm repeating this from the previous episode, if the connection is not successful, this basically returns a true or false value. So if the connection is not successful, it will terminate the entire script with something called die, right? Now if the connection is successful, it will echo out connected to the database successfully. So it will not execute this condition at all, and it will echo out this. Now to insert data into our table, we have created two variables. One is called name, another is called email. So inside name we have Bob, and inside email we have bob@example.com. Now we have run an SQL query through our string, this variable. So our SQL query is insert into our users table. This is our users table. So insert into our users table. Inside our name and email parameters, that is our name and email columns, we have inserted the name, that is Bob, and our email, that is bob@example.com. Now in order to run this query, we have to use something called MySQL query, and inside those we have to enter first of all the database that we are connecting to, so our con variable, our connection variable, and our SQL query. So in our testDB database we have run this query SQL, right, and we have inserted into our users table. Now this also returns a true or false value. So if the connection, or I mean if the query is run successfully, it will tell us user added, and if not, it will throw us an error. And this last line is basically to close the connection between our PHP and our database, and this is necessary if you want to work with other databases as well. If you write down this code, you can type out this line once again and update your database parameter. So yeah, that is how it works. Now in order to execute the script, I'll just load localhost index.php, and it will say new user added successfully. So let's check this out, and I have added Bob, and this is basically set to auto increment, so that is why it's 2 after 4. I have deleted the keys 1 and 3. And the reason I'm going so fast is because this video already has the update and delete to be discussed, and I have discussed this inserting and basically creating data phase inside PHP already in our 8th episode. So that's why I'm going so fast. So okay, if you don't understand this, I suggest you look at our episode 8. Link will be in the description. Now after that, we will also, I don't even have to delete all of this. We will keep this connection variable, and we will have to keep our SQL query variable as well. So that was for our create part, right? Now after create we have C, now R, CRUD, so read. This is for displaying data. Now we have already done this in the episode 8. We have already done this also in episode 8, but this time let's do it a bit different. Let's fetch and display all users from our table inside a table. So first of all, let's delete all this and expand this a bit. And as for our query, we will learn a select query. So we'll select everything, and that is star. Select everything from our users table. So our table name is users, so select everything, that is select all from users, and then that is basically our query. Now as for our running the query, we'll store this result in a variable called result, and we will run MySQL underscore query, and then $con, this is our connection variable. So yeah, I've explained that already, and $SQL. So this is our SQL query to be run. Now if MySQL num rows, so as discussed before, if we put in our result variable inside this will basically give us the result. So if we have selected everything from our users table, first of all, this will give us this row to Alice and Alice at example.com, and next up it will give us this row. So that is what basically MySQL num rows does. So if our number of rows is more than 0, we will execute and make a table. So echo, and we'll write some HTML. So table tag and then border equals 1, and then after that we'll create a table row, and inside that a table head, which will have our ID, and we'll close our table head, close our table row. No, actually, we'll create another table head called name, and then we'll close our table head. Once again, table head for, and this time it's for our email. So those are the 3 columns that we have in our MySQL database. So this is for email, and close table head. You know what? Let's not keep space here. After that, we'll close the table row. Now, after this, while we store our SQL data in a variable called row, and this will basically be an associative array. So MySQLi fetch assoc $result. So what this is doing is it is converting the data that is retrieved, that is, it is converting MySQL rows into associative arrays. So MySQL fetch assoc means it fetches the rows from our MySQL database and converts them into associative arrays. So in order to access those associative array keys and values, we'll use the box notation. So box notation. So tr, once again, table row. And as for our table data, we will first of all close this and concatenate our row associative array, but inside the row we'll access ID. Okay, we'll be accessing ID, and then we'll be basically concatenating closing td as well. Now once again we'll create td, and you know what, let me just repeat this line. Alt shift down, it'll copy that. Alt shift down once again, Alt shift down, but instead of td we'll keep here tr. No, we'll close our table row and then close our string and then end it with a semicolon. So at first we'll access row ID, and then after that our name, so name, and after that our email. Okay, now after that we will close our table tag, so we'll echo out /table, and this is all inside our if condition. So if first of all it has no result and there's no data is present in our database, it should just say no users found. So echo no users found, and we have closed our connection to our database already. So let's run our PHP file. Let's see if there are any errors. So no errors at all. Okay, now I'll explain basically what happened. So select star from users means it this query selects everything, that is every row from our database. So since there are 2 rows, first of all 2 rows are selected, and since there are 2 rows, obviously the value that MySQL num rows returns is more than 0. So 2 is more than 0, so this code executes and makes a table header, and but it checks and converts the row data into associative array data. So while row, we store our row data in this associative array variable. It will access that those values from variable by using their keys, and after that they'll insert it in a table. So that is why we have created an HTML table format and ended our table tag. Now let's say we delete all of this, right? Okay, I'll refresh this and I'll delete the other data as well. If we delete all of this and run this query once again, it will say no users found, since MySQL num rows will not return anything at all. And you know why? Because there are no rows at all present in our users table. So our users table should be empty when we check upon it. So ID, name, email, but this is empty. And as you can see, since we have run this query, it is visible here as well. This is our last query that we run in our MySQL database. So that is how reading data, that is printing out or displaying data, works from PHP. Okay, now that we have created, that is inserted data into our database, and read data, that is displayed data from our database, it's time for updating data or editing data. So let's say a user wants to update their name. Here's how to update the name of the user with the ID. So for now, our database has a username called Alice, or name called Alice, with an ID of 1. So let's set this aside and open our VS Code. And this is how you would update the data through an SQL query. So first of all, you type out SQL equals update. Which table are you updating from? So users, and then set name equals, let's say we want to change the name of Alice to Bob, where ID equals 1. Now this is our SQL query to be run. Now just like before, we have to put MySQL query, so MySQL underscore query, and inside our query we'll put first of all our connection variable, that is con, and then our query to be run. Now if this query is successful, that is if the ID is, if the name is updated successfully, it will type out record updated successfully, and if not, that is else, it will echo out an error occurred, and it will concatenate the MySQL error, and inside this it's gone. Okay, now for that I will close the connection with the database, so MySQL underscore close. Okay, and inside this it's gone. Now it's basically searching for name to be updated, but it is searching the name to be updated by ID. So since it has an ID of 1, Alice will be changed to Bob. So we'll run this, and it says record updated successfully, meaning that it should be changed to Bob. So Bob. So that is how you update the values to PHP and MySQL. So you change the name. You can also change the email actually. So if I type out here email equals bob@gmail.com and run this, it should update the email to bob@gmail.com. So that is how you edit data or update data from PHP and MySQL. Now let's talk about deleting data. Now all of this will stay the same. We'll just change the query. Now instead of update, we'll type out delete, or actually delete in caps. We'll delete from our users table, where ID equals 1. Now this is deleting a whole row. Keep that in mind. So instead of record updated successfully, we'll type out record deleted successfully. Now we'll save this and we'll make a record deleted, now meaning this should not have any record at all. So it is empty. The table is empty. Just like that, the row with ID 1 is gone. So you have to be careful with delete, since once the data is gone, it's gone, unless you back it up. And that was basically it for this video. It was pretty simple. It was built upon, this video was built upon the foundation from episode 8. But I think the concept of CRUD, or create, read, update and delete, from PHP and MySQL is pretty clear. Keep in mind that you should always use MySQLi error to debug your queries during development. And let's review what we did today. We use insert to add users, we use select to fetch them, update to modify them, and delete to remove them. So nice work. You have now performed full CRUD operations with PHP and MySQL, a critical foundation for building blogs, dashboards, admin panels, and more. Now in the next episode, we'll build a real-time user registration form and insert that data into your database, all live. So if you like this video or found it helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss what's coming up next. But until then, bye bye and happy coding. Hello everybody and welcome to the 10th and final episode of our PHP series. And this episode is all about working with forms in PHP. That is how we can handle data that the user inputs in our HTML form and insert that data and work with that data through our database. So far we have inserted, updated, read and deleted data manually using PHP, but now it's time to make our application truly interactive by letting real users input data through HTML forms that gets saved in our database. So by the end of our episode, you'll have something like this. Suppose you want to enter your name okay, let's say it's Jalis, right? So Jalis at gmail.com. And if I click on submit, it'll say data submitted successfully, and if we go back, it'll display that data beautifully in a table. And this is all inside our index.php file. And if we submit some more data, so let's say Sam once again, and Sam at gmail.com, and if we hit submit, it'll say data submitted, and this is redirected to our insert.php page. And if we go back, we can see that in our PHP MyAdmin as well, inside our users database, or I mean users table, the entries are saved. So that is what we will achieve by the end of this episode. And a quick disclaimer that we have already discussed full CRUD operations in episode 8 and 9 of our PHP series. So in order to not make this video a bit long, I am only going to physically type out the index.php and insert.php file. So I have already edit.php and delete.php ready, so I will just be explaining them briefly. Now with that, let's get on with our episode. Now first, we'll build a simple form where users can submit their name and email, and we'll be doing that inside index.php. So just so you know, I have started XAMPP, and inside XAMPP, Apache and MySQL. Now inside this VS Code, this is our edit.php and delete.php. We'll be discussing these later, but for now I'll be removing this code. This was to demonstrate to you guys what it was. So I'll be typing out an HTML format first. So first I'll type out the boilerplate for HTML. Let's say form with PHP, right? And inside our body, we will be typing out a form tag, and this will be directed towards, like I said before, the insert.php, and the method that we'll be using is post. And after that, we'll be typing out an input tag, which will have a type of text, and the name will be name, and we'll keep a placeholder which instructs the user or prompts the user to enter your name. And we'll make this field required, so the user has to fill this if he or she wants to submit the form. So our br tag, let's copy this line, and then I just did that with Alt, Shift and down arrow key, by the way, if you don't know. Now after name, we'll be sending our email, so let's say enter your email. After that, we'll be creating a button for submission. So button, and its type will be to submit our form. So it'll, okay, forgot to close the quotes there, submit, and then it'll just say submit and slash button. So close our button tag. Now this is it for our PHP file. So let's just send this to the side and reload this. So you can see that enter your name and enter your email has been outputted to our web page. Now to handle our submitted name and email, let's create an insert.php page, and moreover this form will send the data to insert.php using the post method. So we'll be creating some code inside the insert.php. Now for that we'll be creating a connection variable as discussed in our previous episode regarding, okay, we'll just open the PHP tags at first with a question mark and PHP, and then end it with a question mark and angular bracket. Okay, I meant to type out question mark, okay, and angular bracket. Okay, now inside this, if we are working with a database and PHP, we of course need a connection variable called con. Now you can name this variable whatever you want, but I will name it con. Now we'll use MySQL underscore connect, and as discussed before, first we have to enter the name of our server. We are using XAMPP localhost, so I'll enter localhost, and then root, this is our username, our default password which is empty, and then our database name. Now if you might have noticed, or if you have watched our previous episode, we are working with a database called testdb. So inside this parameter or argument, I'll enter testdb. Now that is it for our connection variable. Now since we want to confirm that this request is handled by post, so we'll use the server superglobal. So server, and then inside server we will use the request method underscore method, and if our request method is equal to post, we will then work with our data and store them in PHP variables. So for storing, okay, let me turn off caps lock. So for storing name, we'll use something called HTML special chars. Now this is to prevent cross-site scripting attacks, that is XSS attacks, so that the malicious people or hackers can't enter data directly into our code. So that HTML special chars helps in that. So we'll access the name that we sent through our post method. We have sent name and email. So in order to handle that, we'll be using the post superglobal and accessing it through name at first. So name will be stored in name, and let's just copy this line, and we'll store email as well. So email and then email. Pretty simple, right? Now after storing our variables, okay. Now after storing our data entered through our form or received through our form inside variables, we will now work with that data. So let's create an SQL query that handles it, and we'll be creating it inside our if statement. So SQL $SQL will equal to, now we have to insert this data that we just received into our database, so we'll use an insert query. So insert into our users table. So insert into users. What are we going to insert? We are going to insert name and email. So these are the values of our columns, name and email. These are the values, and I meant these are the column names, but the values are stored inside our variables. So we'll be using our variables name and then email. Let's close our bracket and end it with a semicolon. Now that is our SQL statement. Now in order to execute this SQL query, we will use MySQL query. So if MySQL underscore query, and we'll be running this through our connection variable since we want to run that query inside our test database, and that test database is linked through our connection variable, that is con. So we'll have to enter con at first and then our SQL query, so SQL. Now if this query is successful and data is inserted successfully, we will echo out data submitted successfully. And then after that, we'll be echoing a link that will take us back to our index.php page. So br, first of all, to make this link occur in a new line, and then an anchor tag with an href attribute of index.php. And after that, we'll close the anchor tag and just say go back inside the link like we observed before. Close the anchor tag, and then we'll write, just after our semicolon, we'll write our else code. We will echo out that an error occurred. So if our query is not successful, it should tell it why it is not successful. So error, and then we'll concatenate an error message, and we'll do that by using MySQL underscore error and $con. Now this will output an error message if any error occurs. So MySQL close. Now this is to disconnect our PHP from our database after we are done with our operation. Now, okay, let's test if our method was successful. So let's type out Marcus, and let's say Marcus @gmail. I meant to type out @gmail.com. So let's submit it, and it said, okay, I think I've made a mistake. Okay, submitted, TED. I meant to type out T. Why am I typing? Okay, so it says data submitted successfully, but I think now this will send our data twice into the database, but that's not a problem. Let's check our database to see if any data occurred. Now, of course, there's Jalis and Sam, but let's see if Marcus appeared. Okay, we have Marcus twice since I decided to reload that page, Marcus and Marcus. So at least our insert.php is working just fine. Now we have handled data or received data through our index.php form and inserted that data successfully into our database. Now let's try to read this data and display it through a table. And that we'll do that by creating a table which fetches the data from the database inside our index.php file. Now outside our HTML tag, I'll create a PHP tag. So we'll do that by doing this. Now question mark and angular bracket n. Now inside this, we'll again create a connection variable, since we have to do that when we want to work with MySQL and PHP at the same time. So MySQL connect, once again localhost, and then our root, which is our username, and password, and our test DB. This should be DB. Okay, my D key was not working. But after that, I'll create an SQL query. SQL equals, we will select each and everything that is present in our database. So select star from our users table. So select star from users, and we'll end this. And we'll be storing that query, we'll be executing that query inside a result variable. So MySQL query, we will run our SQL query, but we'll be running that through our con database and SQL. Okay. Now what this will do is, since we are selecting from our database that we are trying to read the data from our database, this will return some number of rows. Now we'll be using something called MySQL num rows, and then we'll be storing our result variable. If the number of data returned is more than 0, then we'll output that data into our table. So we'll create a table by using echo an h3 tag, and let's say it will say all users, right? And we'll close that h3 tag, and after that we'll create a table. So creating a table is kind of tedious, so I'll directly skip to the part where I have to explain some stuff to you guys so that this video is not too long. Okay. Okay, now we are done with creating our table. It would have been tedious to type all this out and make you guys wait, so I took this approach. So what we have done here is we have created a table with a border of 1, and on that table, for our table headers, that is for our column names, I have created table headers which has ID for our ID, name for our name, and email for our email. And we have also added an extra column for actions which will contain our edit and delete actions. Now, after creating our table header, we have written, while inside our row variable, we have used a method called MySQL fetch assoc, and we have stored our result variable. Now, since this query, that is selection query, will return a number of rows, we have converted those rows into associative arrays and stored those associative arrays one by one in our row variable. So first of all, this will be converted into an associative array which has a key of ID, name, and email, and we can access that through our bracket notation, square bracket notation. So row ID will return this ID, row name will return this row name, and row email will return this email, Jalis email. Okay, so I hope that is clear to you guys how we are accessing this. This is basically an associative array. So not only that, since we have to send data through our query string to our edit.php and delete.php, we have also accessed their ID and sent that through a query string. So this is basically using the get method through a query string. We have created an anchor tag where we send the ID of the row that or the data that we have to edit through our query string. So ID equals to, and we will handle that get request inside our edit.php, and the same is with delete.php. So this is sending. So if I click on the delete button, it is essentially sending the ID of the data that I want to delete through this query string. So that specific data will be deleted. So I hope that is clear to you guys. Now let's see what happens if we open up index.php. If we reload index.php actually, so it will display our data. Now about this query string, if I press on edit in sam@gmail.com, you can see that ID 15 is sent in our edit.php file, and we are prompted to edit our data. So that is how it works. Now I hope you understand this display of data through our table. Now I'll explain to you guys how the edit.php works. Okay, so first of all, like I stated 2 times before, inside our index.php and insert.php file, of course we have to use the con variable, and this is all the same that I explained before, but here we have used the isSet method to see if we are receiving any ID key through our get superglobal. So let me just control Z that. Now if we are getting an ID key, so suppose if we click on edit, and if we are getting this key, we will start executing our edit request. So it will specifically select that user from our table, and it will display that user's data onto our form. So it has form with Jalis and jalis@gmail.com already present, since we have entered the value of our associative array. So we have done the same. We have searched for that ID. We have searched for the ID 14 inside our database, and it will return that ID along with all of the data inside an associative array, like in our insert.php file, and we can access that name and email through that same associative array. So that is how Jalis and jalis@gmail.com is being displayed inside our input fields, since we have set those values here. Now if I update those values and pass them through our post method, since we have not defined any action attribute, this same edit.php edit.php file will receive our post superglobal. So then we can set our name and email inside our updated name and email after we click on update. Inside these variables, we have used HTML specific as here as well, and we can run an update query. So we will replace that name. So we will replace Sam with ASDS, and we'll replace the email with our newly updated email. So if I click on update, it will say user updated, and it will go back to users, and you can see that we have updated our name and email successfully. So that is how edit.php works. And as for delete.php, it is really freaking simple. Like I said before, we are sending our ID. If I click on delete, it will send that ID to delete that whole item or that whole row from our database inside our delete.php file. And inside our delete.php file, we have just checked if we have gotten that ID superglobal or not, and we have just run a delete query. So we have run MySQL query delete, and if the deletion was successful, it will say user deleted like it says here, or if an error occurs, it will just say error. So let's check if our 14, that is Jalis, was deleted. So we can see that our delete is working perfectly fine as well. Now, of course, this might have felt rushed, so I will provide a document which has all of these codes ready and for you guys to test inside our description. And that was basically it for today. You have built a fully functional PHP and MySQL mini app. We have accepted user input via a form, inserted data into a database, displayed it dynamically, and also allowed editing and deleting via URL parameters like this. So that is it. You have made it to the end of this PHP series, and that's a huge achievement. Whether you followed along every video from the start or joined midway, I hope this series helped you build real confidence with PHP and also MySQL. So from basic syntax to building a complete CRUD app, you have laid the foundation for dynamic web development. Thank you so much for watching and learning with me. And if you found the series helpful or this episode helpful, don't forget to leave a like and comment if you have any questions or queries, and subscribe for more programming series ahead. Keep building, stay curious, and happy coding. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.